everyone, and welcome back to What Moves You with Jessie. I am so delighted to share with you today that I have my wonderful, magnificent, so wise mom on the podcast today, Sherrill Douglas. She is a former therapist and has been a wonderful guest on this podcast multiple times. And she will be here more times in the future because I am finally responding to the requests that have come in about can we hear more from you and your mom? So I know how much she means to you as well. And I am so excited to have her back on the podcast. So without further ado, hi, Mom.
Hi, Jess. How am I going to live up to that for crying out loud?
I was gonna say that you were likely cringing as I was talking, but it is the absolute truth, Mom.
Oh, thank you.
And 100%. I mean, for God's sakes, let's tell the people this is take 3 of starting this episode because you and I burst into tears immediately because there's a lot of love.
I know. Best ever.
Yeah.
Oh, we're lucky.
We're so lucky.
Mm-hmm. It's so wonderful to love somebody and like them at the same time.
I agree.
That makes it go all the way through.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that feels nice. It's so true.
And respect each other.
Yes. Absolutely.
That's what my mother always said, and your grandmother, if you don't have respect, you don't have love. That was her wisdom.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually never heard you say that, and that is 100%
Oh, really?
true. Yeah, I don't think so. I've heard a lot of her. I love a lot of her one-liners that, you know, she
don't fuss it.
Say it again.
She used to say to me, don't fuss it. Whatever fuss was to her. Don't fuss it. Mm-hmm.
Don't fuss it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The other one that always comes to mind, those good things come your way.
Yes. Always. Yeah. Good things come your way. Wisdom.
Yeah. And it's so true because honestly, there are times when I will feel like I'm in the pits and her voice will come into my head and it helps me have a little more patience. And then as always, things start to work out and then I go, there it is. You were right.
There it is. Exactly. It's amazing. What's that thing? Then, you know, my friend Sandy of 50 plus years, and her mother always said, you can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. Doesn't matter how much mayonnaise you add.
Yes.
Now that's straight from Oklahoma. So I love our mother's sayings.
Yes.
Their sayings. Mm-hmm.
So good.
Words of wisdom. Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly.
So
we are here with a cup of coffee and just chatting. And, you know, I just thought I'd let the folks know that as we were kind of doing our pre-ramble of what should we talk about, yes. you shared that last night you had kind of a moment of feeling, and I'm going to have you explain it to everybody.
Sure.
But you had a moment while you were sitting on the couch where you realized you were feeling disassociated.
Right.
And what I really appreciated and why I thought this is a good thing to share is that, you know, I could feel that the feeling behind it as you shared was that you weren't scared of the feeling and that you actually saw it as kind of a helpful thing that was happening. So before we share the story, can you share your definition of what disassociated means?
Well, that I'm not connected. And if it was kind of raw, you know how I get raw, I don't give a shit. is kind of the raw part, but I'm kind of disconnected and I don't have my feet on the ground because I tend to live in a world inside of me that is that I associate. I hate psychobabble, just chatting with it, but I associate into life so much. I feel. I'm a huge feeler. I'm passionate. I exhaust myself. I'm a huge feeler. And then the way I can kind of understand myself is if I don't get it, then I make a picture. So I'm a feeler first. I'm they call it in psychobabble, they call it kinesthetic first. And then I'm visual. And then I'm auditory. And of course, there's always taste and smell, which is gustatory and, olfactory. So with those five senses, that's the highest, the most. But I know that your sister Robin and I, if we smell beef, she said, I know I'm lonely for you when I smell beef, and then I see your face in front of my face. And so those are the years when, she was working 24/7 at Disney. So, which is it's interesting. So for me to go to a picture, because I was real tired. So I went to a picture and here I was looking at myself. I was holding a balloon and the balloon was floating way up in the air, and I was the balloon. So that means I was really floating above the ground. So that's in some ways restful for me. But I learned about myself enough that I don't get afraid of it. I've just learned that that's my process inside. And so it's kind of restful for me to be in my head instead of my feelings. And sometimes that's the best way for me to be for a while.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. I'm gonna poke around a little bit, but
Good.
I do also want to tell the audience, tell the listeners, I should say, that the reason why Robin smells beef when she's then missing you is because you make a delicious beef dish. So it's very comforting, and we all think of you when we smell that onion soup mix in that beef dish. So I didn't want anybody to think that we're all sniffing cows and thinking of you.
Not attractive? Doesn't sound attractive, does it?
So I wanted to put the full picture for people who are like,
oh,
why does she smell beef and then think of Sherrill?
Smelling cow pies.
Okay. But I totally, I know it gave me the giggles, but I absolutely understand that. I'm sure people can relate to that about, they smell. Like I have a dear friend whose mom passed away many, many years ago. And whenever she smells her perfume, which I mean, I'm like that with you, I can smell, perfumes out in the world and go, oh my God, that smells like mom. And just be right into the feeling.
Right. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. So let me poke around a little bit to flesh it out for people like when you were sharing how you said that you feel like you associate a lot in your life. Mm-hmm. So when you say that, is it that you feel kind of, why don't you explain just even that piece? Just when you say, I associate a lot in my life, what does that mean to you?
Good question. It's kind of like, if I'm going to worry about you or your sisters, boy, do I get into it. I live it. And you all of you are just fine. Mm-hmm. And if I'm going to worry about if I'm going to if I'm going to be in joy, then I'm laughing like a hoot, right? I don't sit back and watch somebody laugh.
Yeah.
So it's just like if you, gosh, here's another picture. The thing that came up for me was if I'm going to walk in the rain, or if I'm going to walk through a cloud of fog or whatever it is, I'm in the middle of it. I'm not on the outside looking at it. Okay. So like up here when I got 112, boy, was it a tough one because some people can kind of disconnect from it and say, yeah, it's hot, but they don't feel it all the way through. But that one's a hard one not to feel. But it gets unbearable. But, I also get cold and I get this and I get that. But if there's a movie, Galen will kind of sit back and watch the whole thing and he looks at me and he says, it's just a movie. I'm right into the movie. I'm associated with the movie. I'm feeling everything everybody feels in the movie. I am literally in the movie, like a character. I'm in the movie. And I say, I know. It's just a movie. But for him, he can kind of sit back and he can just look at it and not. Sometimes if it's real sensitive, and then he'll get a quiet tear. But most of the time for me, I'm crying, or I'm angry, or I'm this, or I'm that. I exhaust myself.
I love it because really what you're pointing to, I'm going to sound like I'm taking a left turn here, but
okay, that's good.
But what you're pointing to is the gift of consciousness, right? Because consciousness makes, is the thing that animates everything.
Yeah.
So, ultimately, it's such a wonderful experience when we're in the movies or we're reading a book or all of these things.
Yes.
What can be equally as kind of in maybe, I don't want to put a negative word on it because it's not negative at all, but that same consciousness that makes a movie or a book or the experience of rain or the experience of sunshine on your face be so delicious and wonderful, it's in the very same vein going to be animating everything in your mind that you are getting.
Yeah, exactly. Well said.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a couple, and they're building a nest outside the back door, the window, and it's way up in a tree, one of the trees over the next house, and it's beautiful. See those beautiful hawks getting sticks and building their nest, and then we keep watching them through the binoculars. It's just, to me, it's magic. Somebody else would be just kind of nice looking at that experience, but for me, it's magic. Like a flower is magic. It's exhausting sometimes, but it's yeah. But that's yeah. So that's I guess that's when I said I was up in the balloon. It's kind of a nice restful place away from that being in the movie all the time of life. And it can be the opposite for some people. They will disassociate because some past experience they've had, and they will disassociate from everything and not talk to people for a long time or whatever. But that's their kind of more probably restful place about whatever their history is. So it can be, if you're not too afraid of it, and it's also if you just understand it, that you can pull yourself back and put your feet on the ground and be more connected with people and that kind of thing. So
That's what I was loving that you were saying about it. So, the reason why I brought in the consciousness factor is because I think sometimes we want to pick and choose, like, oh, can we not have all the movies in our mind be so
Right,
animated? But yes, I would love to have everything animated when it comes to the good stuff, right?
right, right.
And and so what I'm hearing you is, when we're so kind of oddly enough, what's coming up for me is just turned on by being so engaged in everything
Right,
that's coming across our mind and in our life.
right,
That's why I loved that you used when you were talking about, yeah, I was a little disassociated last night, that it was coming from a place of you could see that it was helpful because it was almost like this built-in, it's it's part of our built-in system that really takes care of us, of like, you've been working really hard, so I'm going to help you tap out here for a minute.
right, right, right. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And it's helpful every once in a while when Galen will say, it's just a movie. When
Yeah.
we're watching a movie, it's just a movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then he pulls me back a little bit, and then it's really helpful. Sometimes it's really helpful to me to do that, especially if it's a hard movie to watch.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Have you, just out of curiosity, so when you were first saying it, you said, you said it feels more like you're just in your head as opposed to in your feelings. So
Yes.
if you kind of reflect on that experience, do you feel busy in your head when you disassociate, or does it actually feel quiet?
But it's real quiet.
Oh, it's quiet.
Yeah. It's away from busyness. It's away from, it's just being looking at things, but not having a lot of feelings attached to them. And so, I used to, when I didn't understand it, I used to do that off and on, just probably because I was doing so much and everything was important to me. And then as I've retired, I have more choices, raising you for going to school, you know, building a business, um, actually doing two things at once, being a social worker and private practice. That it's really amazing about when you're going all the time, one thing to another, and so. But now I have more time to be more in thinking about the different things, and so it's sometimes I can see it as more restful. It probably would have been more restful when I was in those other places, when I was busy from early on in the morning until night. So I don't know, but this is where I am now at 79.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I wonder. I just love, because what I think, what I notice in what you're talking about, and then I'm kind of reflecting on my own experience,
Sure.
because I would say I tend to feel kind of disassociated at the end of the night when I'm watching a comfort television show,
Oh yeah.
the way that you're describing it, where I feel very quiet inside,
Right.
and I'm just kind of just, I guess it's almost like when we say someone is zoned out.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's probably it a lot.
Yeah.
You know? And you finally, all the feelings get kind of tired, and because that's not how you usually are. So it is restful. I experience that too. Um, an easy movie, a restful movie, especially later on, is really nice. But yeah,
Yeah.
I used to think it was kind of bad to disconnect from your feelings, and I use my head all the time in private practice, but also use my whole self, But to check in with myself about things, but it's nice just to drop those at the door sometime and go floating in a balloon.
Yeah. So that's why, what would you say to people who feel, because I think like socially, meaning, out in the world with humanity, the idea of, or even just the word disassociated has kind of come with negative connotation.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting. I was on a practitioner's call where we meet with Linda Pransky that I've
Yeah.
shared with you. Yeah. And there's a bunch of us in the group, therapists and coaches. And Linda was actually sharing the same thing, that because I think a therapist had asked her, yes, because a lot of people are going, obviously, the years, we're in 2025 for anybody in the future that might be listening to this. But, socially, it's challenging right now. So a lot of people that this therapist is seeing, a lot of her clients are like federal workers who've lost their jobs and all of these things. So there's a lot of stress about their
Yeah.
livelihood and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was asking Linda, kind of, she said, of course I'm helping them, kind of come home to themselves and kind of remember that that they will get some great ideas that will help them as they settle into their new life. But she had asked Linda, she said, what else can I say to them when they feel like all of their world is crumbling and it feels quite traumatic?
Can't imagine.
Yeah. And Linda said, well, what do you do? She just put it back to the therapist. She said, what do you do when you are really going through a hard time? And it was a great question, because the woman then shared, I tend to kind of lick my wounds for a few days, and then at some point I start to reach out to my friends, and I'll have a dinner with my girlfriends, and that will kind of help me feel like I'm coming back to life a little bit, just getting the connection. And then the woman asked Linda, she said, what do you do, Linda? And Linda goes, well, because Linda was also a former therapist, just like you, and then talking to this therapist, right? She said, well, she said the field of psychology might not like what I'm about to say, but she's like, I just disassociate. And so it's so interesting to me that was, 2 weeks ago, this conversation. And I love that then you brought it up yesterday. And so in both contexts, I really appreciate that instead of seeing this word or even the state of disassociation, I really appreciate that that we're talking about it as not this big scary thing. Like it's almost like we're talking about it as a state that can be helpful, especially when we understand it.
Exactly. And when we're afraid or we're thrown in some way or whatever, it's just nice to back away from it and see it at kind of a different angle.
Yes.
But not so wound up about your feelings, of fear and, whatever. Yeah, it can be really positive. It's really helpful to know that state. It's really helpful and not, like you said, be. I think if I was going to give you an example, I know of a couple that I had years ago. I know of a couple, and he would disassociate just because, like I said, from a past really hard childhood. So the way he managed a lot of things, but probably when it got such a bad rap, is that for her, she's a good example of she'd move into him, his wife, and move into him. And she couldn't get anything out of him. So there wasn't he didn't associate back into being able to talk with her or anything. So I would imagine if you were on the other side of a person that disassociates all the time because that's the way they feel safe, or that's just automatic, they haven't even thought about it, that then I can imagine it would be very lonely on the other side. And so, therefore, you can understand why it's hard for people to be next to, why it got such, it's so, in some ways, it feels like it's out of control of a person instead of you're taking a rest and then you'll come back in, but they don't kind of have a choice. All of a sudden they're back in, or they're gone until they know more about it.
Yes.
But the extreme, I heard, an extreme example is Galen, is that my husband Galen, when he severed his leg almost when he hit a tree when he was flying. He was
Paragliding.
Yeah. And because he was taking care of this young man that was with him, he told him he was teaching him. So he told him to go back down in this backyard. He was in Alaska and he hit the bottom of the tree. I thought he hit the top of the tree, but he hit the bottom of the tree. And the kite just came down because it was a downwind all of a sudden. And when he went in, they called the ambulance and he went in for surgery to the hospital, and he had no feeling whatsoever in this horribly wounded leg. He could twist his leg here and there, and it was so broken, and so he wore a 3/4 calf cast for. He was in the hospital for weeks, and then he wore the cast for 5, 6, 7 months afterwards. And so, but the way the doctor said, I have to take care of this severed arm with this young man that just came in, and it severed his arm, so I want to put it back on. And he said, I can't do your surgery right now. And he said, do you need any drugs? Do you need anything? I'll give you anything. And he said, I don't feel a thing. Just go ahead and take care of that young man. And so he was some hours without any painkillers. And so it's really interesting how we all kind of get to a place that we use it in some ways, So anyhow, I don't know if that was very appropriate, but there you go.
Yeah. Oh, it was 100% on the money. Because I just really appreciate seeing it as a gift of how our system works.
Right.
Because, I often talk about, like I recently released an episode. I think it was recent. I would say in the last month or so. Mm-hmm. But I released an episode about how worry is a loss of perspective. Yes. And how we can get so caught up and mired in all of that thinking, and it really narrows like our aperture of how we're seeing things.
Right.
But I really appreciate that you're sharing the human side of where we can kind of naturally go to about worrying about things and thinking about how much, how things are going in our life. And, I don't ever want to be misinterpreted as somebody who says you shouldn't do these things. Like you shouldn't worry. What I love, about this conversation is talking about how it is wonderful to get onto it and recognize how worry really isn't helpful, but it's such a natural habit for us as human beings to go there. And isn't it neat to see that even if you do, our system knows how to take care of us, to settle our nervous system, to settle our mind, to help us come back and then gain some perspective.
Right. Exactly.
So I just appreciate this conversation being around like, yes, we can have all this understanding about how our mind works and, how worry, ultimately isn't the full picture. So it doesn't really make sense to do the more you see it. But also, it's a natural habit that we can get up to in our brains.
Right.
and how wonderful that there is this mechanism that's built into us that helps us kind of get into a state of self-preservation without even having to think about it.
Right. I mean, if you may, it's amazing. I mean, I didn't really get how amazing our mind is until I got my cochlear hearing, and how when they turn it on after a month after surgery, and it sounds like beep, 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 beep. It sounds like a chicken talking. And then I practice and practice and practice with reading and listening out loud and all that stuff. And all of a sudden, my brain thinks what you're saying is something I understand. Does that make sense?
Wow. I mean, it's kind of a big thought, but I can feel what you're saying.
Yeah, it's
Share more about what you mean.
well, when they put the wires in my head
Yeah.
to hear
Yes.
that, and it has ideas for the whole system, like you're talking about. After they put the wires in my head, the 21 wires on one side and 21 on the other, up through the cochleal, then what they do is they don't turn it on. They wait till you heal up, and then they don't turn it on at my hearing place. They didn't turn it on for a month, just to let the blood, calm down and let the swelling and all that. Then they turn it on, and they do it all by computer so I could hear. I don't know what I did. Anyhow, and then when they turn it on, then it's my job. And your sisters sent me a book, auditory wise, and then I read it, and I read it out loud. So my brain was really working at different levels. But when I first listened, when they turn it on, is that it sounds like R2D2. Everything you said and everything I said just goes beep, 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 R2D2. And then pretty soon after I practiced for 3 months, listening and keeping them on for 14 hours. I keep them, most regular is 10. I keep mine on listening for 14 hours before I take them out of my head. And then I'm really tired. And then by the time I've done as much as I can after about, it's vulnerable for about 3 months, 4 months. And then that's as much as you're going to get. Then it's your voice to my brain sounds clear about what you're saying. I can hear in exactly the way you say it. So that's what's amazing to me, is that if my brain can do that, just think of all of it that is going through it all the time. And I just can't even pull it together for myself that I can hear the way, instead of you sounding like a freaking chicken or R2D2 or Minnie Mouse.
Wow.
I mean, is it?
Yes. I remember when that happened because they had shared with you that might happen, and that was something that you and I both grieved, because I thought, I'm so happy for
I
you.
would never hear your voice again the way I hear it when you were a kid. Yeah. Yeah.
And so then when they were like, "Oh no, over time you will," I just thought, that is insane.
I know. So now I hear like everybody else does, as far as best it can be. Sometimes I don't hear if somebody's around the corner, and especially like Galen when he's putting his head in his refrigerator and he's talking to me about something. And I say, "Are you nuts? I haven't got a clue what you're talking about." Those are the things that are come up short. the refrigerator. That's what it sounds like to me.
But but listen, but now what just popped for me is so you were hearing things through the computer basically in your head, the new
Right,
computers in your head, right?
right. It's a
And
computer.
then your brain went into memory to make sense of it.
Yes,
And ultimately, that's kind of what we're doing all the time,
yes,
even if
exactly.
you are
Yeah,
hearing. It's like we are constantly,
our body's constantly working in our best interest.
yes, and constantly trying to associate to things so that way it can make sense of things.
Right,
So that's massive to consider because then once you understand that, that's really helpful because then you can kind of see when your brain is making associations from your past that
right,
might not be helpful to you anymore. But
exactly.
it is, but the brain isn't, it doesn't have its own personality. So it's just trying to make sense of things for you,
Yes, exactly. Of the whole world
of the whole world.
and how to manage,
Yeah.
you know.
Wow. And so then, of course, it makes sense why it shuts down and says, screw you. I'm taking a break until tomorrow morning.
I'm going to float on my balloon. I've done a lot of looking at nature things too, and um, people and big, they're on big, huge mountains, and they finally say, we're nothing but a pea in this universe. But it's pretty magnificent what our bodies have evolved to,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And they're using the brain. They're using the brain now. There's a new thing out where one of our renters is blind in one side of her eye, and she has a certain disease, and it's brand new to me, so I couldn't tell you what it is. But they're working with her on wearing glasses, and it will attach to the brain, and the eyes will see. The glasses will see for you, but it's attached to the brain. And that's exactly like my hearing. It's attached to the brain. I hear with my brain. I don't hear, I'm completely deaf. So if you think about that, for the eyes, look at how many blind people will be able to see.
Holy shit.
That's we're in the oh wow. I mean, she's marvelous with what she does.
I am floored by you saying, because I've never heard you say this before, and it just made it click for me. Of course, I have understood. I have understood what, I mean, I was there for the procedure
Well, both of them.
yeah. So
You
I've,
insist.
yeah, I do insist.
Galen loves it, by the way.
Yes. But of course I understand everything that happened that when you take your implants off at night that you can't hear, you're dead as a doornail in there. But I've never heard you say I hear with my brain.
Yeah.
And that just made it click at a deeper level for me because that is of course what you're doing because that the computer that you essentially attach to your head takes the sound information in and then you're hearing with your memories of what that thing should sound like.
Exactly. That's going
That
on all the time. And can you imagine being married to me? Can you? Galen will say he'll be talking to me next to me, and of course it's attached to my cell phone, and then it's attached to the television, so I can't hear anything outside of that. Right when I'm watching television, so he starts talking to me. I don't even have to say, "Honey, I can't hear." I just look at him and he goes, oh, and then I mean, he had to grow with me, right? From being fully hearing to all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, over many years, where we've gone through a lot of different hearing aids and all that kind of stuff. And finally, like my dear audiologist, Charlie said, I said, Charlie, I can't hear anymore. And he said, wonderful, your hearing has gone to shit. And then I said, why'd you say that? Now it's time for your colloquial. I've been waiting for it for years for you.
Yeah.
So anyhow,
Wow.
I don't know. I get used to it. And then I count them, my teeth falling out. So I have to have implants. Can't see with crap. And I can't hear with a damn thing. Pretty soon my butt's going to fall off, but we're going strong.
But you're happier.
Excuse me, you listeners, excuse me, I have a horrible mouth.
I was going to say, but you're happier than ever. So,
oh, yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Jeez. Anyhow.
Just out of curiosity, I've got two things coming up. Well, I want to go back to, I have one thought related to the disassociation thing.
Okay.
I have another thought on this new path of you hearing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, shoot. Both are great directions. I will come back to the disassociated thing because I think I'll remember it, and I'll be sure we put a button on it before we end the conversation. But just out of curiosity, with this new sense, with your hearing changing, just out of curiosity, have you noticed, and maybe you've never thought of this before, so whatever occurs to you, have you noticed, you said when you used to be in the chair as a therapist that you would listen with your whole body.
Right.
And to me, when you say that, that's, as I point to a lot in the podcast, is listening to that deeper wisdom, that quiet voice inside that every single person has, that gives us a nudge of questions to ask or how to listen differently, or, things to do throughout our day. There's just that beautiful natural flow that we can be in.
Right.
And so when you say I listened with my whole body, I know that's what you're referring to, that you were deeply listening to what was occurring to you to ask and how to navigate the conversation with your clients.
Uh-huh.
So with that being said, have you noticed by any chance post cochlear implant installations, notice by any chance if you feel like you're even more in your head or more in your wisdom, or no change at all? Or I'm just curious if you noticed at all if you're listening to one space or the other more often because of.
That's a heck of a question. Amazing question. Of course, I'm inside myself a lot when I've got my outside hearing aids off, attached by the magnet in my head. When I pull those off, of course, I'm only hearing me, right? In fact, Galen said that I talk to myself out loud. And I said, do you hear anything I'm talking about you? But it's true. I don't know. Sometimes I don't know if I'm talking out loud or I'm just talking to myself. It's a strange kind of a thing, but it's mostly if I'm really passionate about something, he says. But so I'm really inside myself. Because I'm not worried too much about what I'm outside saying, I'll probably have to think about that more. But boy, when I don't have any input and I'm completely deaf, I have for maybe 15, 20 minutes, I have tinnitus really bad. It's real loud. It's real loud inside my head, like I did before when I had my hearing aids. I have to listen to all kinds of loudness. And then after that, it's completely done and it's completely quiet. So then that's when I'm really thinking. I'm thinking in my head.
So do you associate being quiet inside as thinking, or do you feel present?
Well,
Or is it more reflective where you're just kind of
oh
letting
yeah,
thoughts come and go?
it's more reflective.
Okay.
It's more reflective. I've done a lot of this year. I've done more past memories, and that's just inside my head. I don't talk about them all that much. But the most endearing thing, especially since my dear friend Sandy is moving to LA, and so all our memories together are amazing. And then just really sweet things, really sweet things from the past. So not a lot of negative things, but really sweet memories of dear friends and when you've known somebody for 50 years. And I also think of my experience with the dad and with mom was when she would say, "Oh, don't fuss it, and good things come your way." And so, some really endearing moments. And that just is, gets you in the heart, especially people who moved on. So I've experienced that more.
Hmm.
And also looking forward to things like, Ridge's graduation and going up to see Cindy and seeing her in Alaska. She's going to kill Galen and I if we don't come, so we got to go cover home butts and doing some things like that. So it isn't like it's just I'm all in the past. I'm also in the future, looking forward to some things. So that's really good, But they're really tender.
Yeah.
And also I see more beautiful birds, more present for those things, enjoying. But there's a lot of things, that are it just that can be really tender inside your own head.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that just feels so, thank you so much for sharing, Mom. And
Mm-hmm.
I was able to, I mean, you did a good job of talking through your tears and letting me, I was able to get quiet and just have my quietly. So thanks for keeping the mic, even though you were working through it. But I just think that's that feels so good. It's so feeling full in a beautiful way.
Right.
Like a reflective mind, to me is, kind of just that feeling where it's like, it's a quiet mind that's just, we're allowing it to wander and kind of let things occur to us and come and go. And that feels very different than when we're chewing on something and we're really working hard in there.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
So
When we're chewing on something and working hard in there, that's when our brain does its wonderful built-in thing of checking out and going, okay, we're gonna disassociate and
right, and it be a little bit quiet and it's nice because nothing bothers me. The house looks like crap. I'll clean it up as I go along, but I'm not fussing about it. And then, that kind of thing. It's just kind of pleasant.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. Then when I need to get back to it, I get back to it. And something all Galen has to ask me is, "Where are you?" And that starts putting I'm being more in the present then, instead of floating around on top of the, stuff, whatever the stuff is, off the ground, looking at things going on.
Yes.
And there's so much chaos right now. We all need to take a break from it,
Yes.
once in a while,
Yes.
and then pay attention to the rest.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I just love that the way that this conversation has been so full of so much ease around just kind of, it's almost like I'm picturing us skiing down a mountain,
Oh,
going
yeah.
side to side.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes you're really chewing on things inside your brain, and sometimes you're reflecting in a nice, beautiful space, and sometimes it's quiet and you're present and just taking in what's around you. And sometimes you're chewing on things again, and then you're disassociating to just get some rest.
Maybe we all have our own dance.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's for sure.
So I think one of the things that was kind of still floating around my head that earlier when I said I still have one more thought about the
Sure.
disassociation,
Sure. Sure.
say or ask you about too, is so for the people who have found themselves in that, it's almost like their brain has kind of gotten into this mental habit of disassociating because they grew up in circumstances where that was the only place that felt safe, was to go inside themselves
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
disconnect from the world.
Exactly.
So so that was a wonderful, helpful coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the people who are now maybe further down the path of life where they can see that it was a helpful coping mechanism at one point, but it's not necessarily, maybe if they experience it temporarily, like you and I are discussing, obviously no big deal. But when somebody is in more of the mode, like you were sharing with that past client, where they find themselves, either themselves or people that they know and love, that they find that they are kind of checked out for days on end.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to those folks who are kind of learning more about themselves and not wanting to be disassociated all the time?
Probably have a conversation like this would be the first one. And talk with them about what's the positive intention, and well, I always had a belief with my clients that we were in it together, that I didn't have the answers, they did. And so it was down further inside of themselves. And so from that point on, because I didn't hold the position that I had the answers, but they did, that from that point on, they could find a lot of themselves. I was just helping getting the shit out of the way so they could see it, they could feel it, kind of a thing.
Yes.
So probably the positive intention of disassociation, what was holding them back? Was it fear? What, just deeper inside themselves, and use it as more of a wisdom instead of some problem about them.
Yeah.
So much I hear the problem, then they write it up in the DSM, and then you get a label on your head, that kind of thing. And there are some people that need more psychiatric care. I can really understand that. That would be out of my scope of work. But it doesn't have to be every psychologist, well, now I'm doing my, I don't know what I would call it. I have my own prejudice on things,
Yeah.
But I know that there's different works for different, but I just couldn't, that wouldn't be something I would do. That wouldn't be something I would do, is I wouldn't do all that psychiatry stuff. But then how many beautiful psychiatrists have learned about the three principles and thought and all that and consciousness of it and have completely changed their whole vision of their lives. That they work with people in a whole different way. So it's not everybody. It's anyhow. That's all I have to say about that.
Well, no, I love it. And so just so people kind of get a bigger picture of what you're saying. So the DSM is a diagnostics manual for the field of psychology that started as a pamphlet when Grandpa was a therapist, and now it's looks like the size of an encyclopedia.
I know.
But
well, that's it. They kept splitting them into one thing or another. And in so many ways, at least in my field, I thought it was disrespectful to have, you're obviously something. And then what you do is there's a big study years and years ago about somehow they got the numbers wrong. And somehow there was a study that got the numbers wrong, and it was actually their social security number, or it was something, and they had these numbers for these people, and they weren't the right numbers at all. It was the whole thing got fouled up. So I mean, that's how, but that's my prejudice. I don't have, but it's my field. That's why I chose my field instead of going into psychiatry or anything, or that wasn't ever my pull. I was here to just like this young man that's done Galen's foot surgery that he hurt so bad years and years ago. That was part of his leg and all that. He said, I was here to make people's life better. I wasn't here. I know that there are people and heart surgeons that help people stay alive. They're, or have different interests. He said, what my interest was and is, young man, is to make a life better. And so that's how we all are. We have different things that we do that pull on us,
Yeah. So just really quickly to make sense of it, you were talking about how people will sometimes, there are some psychologists and psychiatrists, and it's not like it's obviously there's no malintent, but it's that when they're kind of in that conditioned idea,
right?
Somebody has their own kind of process. Sometimes they'll label them something that, manic depressive or bipolar 2, these things, where then people kind of feel like they're trapped by the label.
Exactly.
And so what you're saying is I would rather just kind of have them learn about themselves so that way they don't have to feel trapped by a label.
Any label. And then they can be, and then they can be fully their best human self, And so thank you for the clarification, because you and I have many memories, and to pull it out to the bigger picture and how it fits, that's really helpful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it's because you and I have shorthand. So I know that what makes sense to me might not be making sense to others.
Exactly right.
And when you said that the numbers would get fouled up that time that they did a big study and that do you mean that like patients were getting numbers like to say like this number correlates to bipolar 2?
Yeah. There's always a number. Yeah, there's always a number that's next to it. And if you look at the DSM, and there's always a number next to it. And so then they can look up at different things. And I think that Mary Trump is a psychologist. And so she has her brother set up in many, many, many numbers. And that's her field. Yeah. That's her field. So, you can read about that. And different. So you can have many labels.
Yes. But that would be quite the foul up if they were not using the correct numbers and they were using social security numbers. So that these poor people are in the medical system, walking around thinking that they just have anxiety disorders, and in their
and they go by their label. the label gets stuck on you,
Yeah.
and then it goes in your notes, and then it goes everywhere, and then you're stuck in this place, and then you can't get out of it.
Yeah.
So I just didn't. That wasn't. But I just want to help people make themselves better,
Yes.
feel better about their lives and themselves, and all of that.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Hmm.
Wow.
Kind of a little bit like you, I think. You've always been really a good teacher about all of this. I do my thing. You make clarification. You know, with Dad and my sister and I, we could talk psychobabble at the table for hours and hours, because he was a licensed therapist also.
Yeah. I know the whole family, as we would say.
I know. Amen.
Well,
So,
we have flown right through that hour.
okay.
I do want to say that I am so grateful that we have the opportunity to be able to just talk about life, and I get to have the chance to hear where you're at inside
Sure.
yourself and ask those kinds of questions.
Sure.
I think also, if I could encourage our listeners, that if they have people in their life that they feel like they assume they know, whether it be their parents or their family members or mentors in their life, I think we can kind of get into this place of assuming we know everything. And every time you and I do a podcast, well, frankly, I feel this way about every conversation we have. But
Oh,
especially when we do podcast interviews, Mom, I just love where the conversations take us. And I always learn something new about how you see life and what's going on inside of you. And I just,
thank you.
yeah, but I think,
Being interested. A lot of people aren't. I mean, we go through life, like you said, beside each other, but we don't, in a lot of ways, know anything about each other.
yes, because we're constantly evolving and learning. And
Exactly.
yeah, so I hope people also feel inspired after listening to this. I hope it was helpful in learning more about disassociation, since that's what naturally came up for us to chat about, and
Oh,
the
yeah.
power, our memories and everything else.
Right.
But I hope they're also inspired to go and ask their loved ones more questions about how they see life, because it's a pretty wonderful thing.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Can't say that enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mom. I can't wait for next time, because I'm going to bring you right back on again so we can do this again, and we'll chat about life in another angle.
And the pursuit of happiness.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I love you so, Mom, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yes. Love you tons, honey.
Okay, I'll talk to you soon, Mom.
Sure. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to What Moves You with Jessie. Let's stay connected. You can find more ideas and strategies on being human on my Instagram, @WhatMovesYouWithJessie. Sign up for my newsletter or learn more about working with me at whatmovesyouwithjessie.com. And please rate and review the show and let us know what you think and what resonated. I read every single review. They mean so much to me. You can also call in on our hotline with your thoughts on what resonated there too. It is always live at 818-646-JESS. That's 818-646-JESS. What Moves You with Jessie is produced by Mike McGraw and Tinker City Music. Now, let's take a deep breath and give ourselves permission to live in this moment for what truly moves you.